Hello, welcome to my first ever video. My name is Apollo and I like books. I'm going to be doing for my first video a review of The Songwalker by Zillah Bethell. I read it very recently as part of the Carnegie Shortlist for 2024 and I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads. So if you want to see my full review of this book in writing, my user is the same, it's just Apollo's Shelf, which also applies to my Instagram if you want to follow me and have a look. I don't post very consistently, but I try my darndest. So my plan for this video is the first little segment is going to be a generic overview, my opinions and vibes, as spoiler free as I can keep it. And then the second bit of this video, I'm gonna really pick apart the book and talk about what I liked, what I didn't like, what I thought worked. I've not scripted anything for this video, I'm literally winging it, so who knows? Maybe some things I say will surprise me as well. This is a journey that we're going through together, but it's fine. So, this book. My initial reaction to opening this book was, I'm not going to enjoy this. Now obviously, there's no shame in DNFing a book at all. If anything, I quite respect people that have the ability within themselves to DNF books, because it is an ability that I do not have. So I powered through, despite hating the book, hating myself for making the decision to read this book. I muscled on, and the payoff was incredibly large. I'm not very critical with my ratings, I'm very generous. I give a lot more 5 stars than a lot of other reviewers that I see, and majority of my book reviews go no lower than 3 stars, and that might be because I get lucky with the books I read, but it's more likely because I'm very generous with my star ratings. I don't really have a system, it's completely vibes, so that's something you will learn about me very quickly. I run solely on vibes. Moving onward to the actual subject of this video, The Songwalker. The writing style was what made it quite tedious for me to get through. So this book is in 3 parts, and the first part felt very repetitive and monotonous, and I felt like the first couple pages is excusable because it's world building and you're getting into the story, you're getting to know the characters. And this book is from first person point of view of the main character, who starts off the book unnamed. This is on the blurb, this isn't a spoiler. She has no idea who she is, where she is. All she's got is one shoe, a dress, what's it called? A suitcase with locks on. She can't remember the passcode and she can't remember how she got there. I found that after the first chapter or 2, I felt like these facts that she didn't remember about herself had just been repeated. That was the only thing that was being said was, oh, I tried to think about my mum, but I couldn't remember. Oh, I tried to think about my name, and I couldn't remember. And it was like, okay, we get it, memory loss. Now, personally, I'm not a huge fan of the memory loss trope anyway. It really takes some good old sucking it up and pushing forward for me to get through books that have memory loss tropes. Even if I am enjoying the rest of the book, a memory loss trope has the ability to really spoil that for me. Okay, we're back. We're slightly lower down, but we're back. What was I saying? Yeah, I don't like memory loss tropes, and this book is pretty much one big memory loss trope, if I'm being honest. So that was a bit of a struggle, personally. But we move past it, we think about bigger, better things. That was my initial reaction to this book. The second I got about a third of the way in, I'd say I'd read that bit and I was like, ooh. And then I got onto this bit, the bulk of the book, and I finished that in one sitting. And then immediately made my 4-star review. Maybe I should have let it fester, maybe I should have thought about it, but that's not how we roll. We go boom, straight in, and then start the next book. That's how we work here. And I still stand by my review that I made when I finished the book. Once you meet the antagonist, once the story starts to unravel, once secrets start to be created and shared and kept, it really makes for an amazing story. It's very compelling, it flows super nicely, it's really well paced, and all of these good things about this book really overpowered my dislike of the writing style. It kind of made up for it. And it was funny because I found that the writing style was bearable when in reference to other characters. Like Tani, for example, the girl that finds the main character right at the beginning of the book, whenever she was being described or she was doing something or saying something, I found the book a lot more palatable. Whereas whenever the main character was in her own head describing something she was doing, describing something she was seeing, I felt very like, I really want you to stop talking right now. Do you know what I mean? It's like someone annoying is kind of just going on and you're like, do you ever get bored of the sound of your own voice? And that is how the main character in this book made me feel, for the most part. She got more likeable towards the end. In the spoiler section, I'm going to talk about why I found her character to be quite disjointed and kind of incomplete in a way, but save that to the spoiler part. But that's just kind of the vibe I got from her. I don't think there's much else I can say without spoiling any of it, but this book was good because I had no idea what was going to happen. So going into it completely unawares, I think, is the best way to read it. As long as you're prepared to get through that chunk of boring at the beginning. I don't like calling books boring because a lot of hard work goes into them, but those first few chapters were boring. But once you get through that, the rest of the the rest of the book is pretty cool. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I rarely ever read more than 100 pages in a sitting, and I read about 300 pages in the span of like a few hours. I sped up my reading pace just to finish this book. So yeah, moving on now to the spoiler section. So if you want to read this book and you don't want me completely spoiling the experience for you, please leave. Please click off, watch another video, come back once you've read the book, so we can compare opinions. So, we start off, our main character, I'm not going to reveal her name until right at the end of this little segment, because I feel like not knowing her name makes some of the plot points more you know. Jesus Christ. Anyways, so we start off, as I said, she's in the middle of the Australian outback, only she doesn't know she's in the Australian outback. And when Tani meets her, she keeps saying, oh, I'm in the middle of nowhere. And Tani's like, Australia isn't nowhere. You're in the bush. Like, stop calling my home nowhere. It's not nice. Which honestly, go Tani. I loved Tani in this book. She was arguably my favourite character. In her culture, there are hundreds of kilometres between each like clump of people, I suppose, like town. She doesn't call them towns in the book, but they're pretty much towns. And ancestors passed down songs that act as maps, thus the Songwalker, which I thought was incredibly clever, because at first I thought the Songwalker was in reference to the bird, which surprisingly had very little significance to the plot, the bird. The bird's name is Candelabra, by the way. I love Candelabra. I suppose he's more symbolic than anything, which I will get to in a short while. But so Tani finds our main character, and when she says to her, like, I don't know what my name is, Tani's like, okay, we'll give you a name. I'm gonna name you Moonflower. So for a couple pages, we had to read this book from the perspective of Moonflower, which, you know, it's all well and good to have cool names. Moonflower's not a cool name, but it's a name. So that was my opinion on that one. Tani is definitely creative, to say the least. But they go off together, and Moonflower quickly kind of starts learning off of Tani and her survival skills, despite being very much different from Tani. Tani's used to this, she grew up here, she understands how things work. Moonflower is not a native, she doesn't get how things work in the outback. You can kind of tell right from the beginning, and I suppose she even kind of like mentions it herself in a few places about how she is very like city girl. Even Tani calls her city girl a few times. She's used to having all this technology and things being within a few feet of each other, and that's not the world that she's entered. That's not Tani's world. She's very unused to that way of life. So she quickly starts to pick things up from Tani, but she's not very good at surviving. If Tani wasn't there, she probably would have died in the first few pages. Tani literally, the first time they met, she rescues her from like a snake. But they become friends. There are moments between them where they kind of fall out, and part of you is like, oh no, I hope they can come back from this. But then another part of you is also like, that's such a stupid thing to fall out about, do you know what I mean? But they always kind of make up and become besties again, which is super fun, because if Moonflower stopped talking to Tani like at the beginning of this book, I don't know if I would have been able to finish it if like Tani wasn't in it anymore. She really carried like a good 70% of this book on her back. But you've got to have a character like that sometimes, so I suppose it's okay. On their journey through the outback, Moonflower finally manages to drag out of Tani what the hell it is they're doing. However, that is very far into the book. She spends a good like 5-6 chapters arguing with Tani, saying, I'm scared, I don't know who I am, and you won't even tell me where we're going. You probably don't even know where we're going. And then it gets to the point where Tani's like, I'm trying to find my sister. And it's like, oh my god, her sister. And then this whole thing gets revealed about how she like ran away. And I was like, I feel like the fact that Tani's not just wandering through the outback the same way that Moonflower is, really creates more depth of her character kind of thing, which is one of the reasons why I don't like memory loss tropes, because it feels like it's an excuse to not flesh out characters, if that makes sense. Like, it's obviously different if you've got a very well developed character who loses their memory. Like, for example, spoilers for the Percy Heroes of Olympus series by Rick Riordan. In the first like 2 books, Jason and Percy have lost their memories. I didn't mind it as much with Percy, because it was like I'd read a whole series with him as the main character. He had backstory for me. He had emotions and dreams and fears, and he felt like a real person. Jason, this was the first time I was meeting this man, and he didn't even know who he was, which is the same kind of scenario that's going on here. Like, it feels like a cop-out. It's like, here's a character, you characterize it in your brain, and I'm not going to do any of the work. And it's like, okay. So that's why I don't like the memory loss trope. And this whole Tani having a reason to be out there made her feel so much more real and developed than Moonflower felt. But we find out that Tani is searching for this person called the Mermaid, which is where some travelling wise men had last seen her sister. So that's where Tani's headed off to. She's following a song that has been passed down from her ancestors, and that's what's going to guide her there. On the way, Tani and Moonflower meet an old man called Eddie, who teaches them a new song to show them how to get water. And that's how Moonflower learns about the songs and how they are maps, and she also learns a couple more survival skills about a certain mark meaning water's nearby. And it's also how she moves on to the next phase of her development, I suppose. Eddie gives her the name Magpie, so she's no longer Moonflower. From this point on, she's now referred to as Magpie, and Eddie tells her to fly away, fly home safe, little Magpie. Not sure why, but the bird theme runs with the book, so we're gonna go with it. It's at this point in the book as well that they stop at the top of Tani and Magpie stop at the top of a hill to have a little chat, and then they look down and realise that Candelabra's gone. Now, the reason Tani has Candelabra with her is because she found him with a damaged wing, so has him in a little makeshift cage while the wing heals, and he's not ready, or Tani thinks he's not ready to be let free yet, even though he doesn't belong in the outback, but she's caring for him until his wing gets better. So the fact that he's not there anymore makes her panic beyond belief, and she's searching for him and finds the empty cage but can't find Candelabra and starts screaming about how fine, you go, I didn't want you here anyway, clearly my help meant nothing to you, blah blah blah. And then Magpie starts to think some of the things she's saying sounds like they apply to someone that's not Candelabra, which is when she's questioned on it, that's when Tani then reveals that her sister ran away. After a lot of arguing between the two, this is because Tani's saying leave it, stop, just stop asking questions, before she then relents and tells her about her sister. And in the end they do find Candelabra again, they pop him back in the cage and they go on their merry way. In Tani's culture, she explains to Magpie that when a person dies, it's disrespectful to use their name for a bit after they've died and use a substitute name for it. That's important later on. I thought that was a good little nugget of information, and it is also important later on in the book, so seal that away in your mind palace. Anyway, they then move on and they're doing quite well, they're faring quite well for themselves, and then they find a truck of hunters, and this truck has a kangaroo strap, a dead kangaroo strapped to the front of it, and they come up and Magpie's hey, help me, and Tani's be so real, you want their help when I've been helping you this whole time, which honestly I'd be angry too, Tani. You stand by your morals, because what the fuck is Magpie doing? Anyway, that's besides the point. These hunters then reveal that Magpie is the headline of every newspaper, and there's a huge reward on her head of $250,000 to have her found and handed in alive. So then Magpie starts thinking, oh my gosh, why do I have a bounty on my head? And something I forgot to mention, Magpie has dreams, right? She has these dreams that reveal little fragments of her past and what she thinks is her life. And recently she has a dream in which she remembers the combination to the lock on her suitcase. So she now knows how to open it, and in her suitcase is a violin. And that's kind of as far as Tani and Magpie have gotten in working out who she is, kind of thing. They know that she's got this violin, and they know that she knew this woman called Madame Petrovsky, and that's all that the dreams have given Magpie. And these hunters are open that suitcase. So she opens it and they're oh my gosh, this suitcase is worth 3 million. And she's oh my gosh, why is there a bounty on my head and why am I carrying such an expensive violin? Did I murder Madame Petrovsky and steal her violin? and now I'm wanted. And she starts like proper stressing out about it, and the hunters take her away, and then Tani's like, bam, and she slingshots them through the truck window and knocks out the so the hunters are a mother and a son. She knocks out the son who's driving, and the mothers start shooting at them as they run away. And then Tani's stressing out. He's like, oh my god, I killed that guy. Like, he wasn't moving, was he? And Magpie's like, oh my god, I killed Madame Petrovsky. And they're both really like, oh my god, like freaking out. Which personally I was like, I feel like you guys are being very dramatic, jumping to conclusions quite substantially, and I feel like it's not that deep. Like, you don't know for certain that you both murdered people, like, chill. But anyway, they freak out. And then we move on with the story, and they're traveling, and they find some like peaches, wild peaches, but they've gone past the kind of zone that Tani is well acquainted with. So she doesn't know if these peaches are poisonous or not, but she thinks, oh, they look similar enough to peaches. So she eats one, and then Magpie also eats them, and they just start chowing down on these wild peaches, only for, surprise surprise, them to both fall violently ill and start like hacking up their insides. So they're like out for the count. Magpie passes out. Tani, I think, also passes out. It's crazy. And then, get this, they're saved by the mermaid. The person that Tani's been looking for, because she supposedly knows where her sister is. And the mermaid tells them that her name was Debonair, not the mermaid. But so Debonair takes them into her like caravan. And she like feeds them, and she gives them new clothes, she washes them up and stuff, and it's like a mini paradise. There's greenery, there's water, there's like good food. And Debonair has a letter from Tani's sister, and Tani has waited for Magpie to wake up before she opens this letter, because she feels like they should do it together. And she entrusts Magpie the kind of her feelings about how she's scared that she's gonna open it and she's not gonna like what's inside. But Magpie says to her, then rip it up and throw it away. And Tani's like, are you crazy? No, I'm not gonna do that. So then Magpie says, then open it. Like, go on. So she opens it, and her sister basically tells her to go back home and to stop looking for her. So Tani's like, well, what the fuck? And she runs off into the woods. So, yeah, Magpie's waiting for her, and she doesn't come out. So she goes in looking for her, and she's like, Tani, like, come on. And it gets darker and darker, and then Magpie starts getting scared, but she keeps looking for Tani. And she eventually finds her crying, like, deep in the woods, and takes her hand, and they leave together. And the journey back seems a lot shorter and almost like brighter than her journey in to find Tani. So they come out, and then Debonair gives Magpie some proper shoes, some like walking boots. So she's now got 2 shoes, and they're good shoes. And she says to Magpie, she's like, play the violin for us. And Magpie's like, I don't know how. She's like, why would you be carrying a violin around with calluses on your left fingers if you can't play the violin? Like, have you tried? So she whips out, she starts playing the violin, she starts playing like Beethoven's symphony or something, or maybe it's like Mozart, I don't know, but she plays something really cool and like impressive, and she has like this really emotional like connection to the music, and she's like, oh my god, I am one with the strokes of the violin or whatever. And then they're all like, and then she opens her eyes, and Debonair and Tani are like, oh my god, wow, that was amazing. And then stage 3 of her general existence through this book, Magpie, she's not called Magpie anymore. Debonair gives her the name Maestro. So we've got a theme with the M names going on. But, so her name is now Maestro. Again, running with the theme of music that is very much embedded within this book. And then she gives Tani and Maestro a bag, like a backpack full of like food and water and supplies. and is like, your sister said she was going to, I think it was like Kalu Kalu. Yeah, like a big rock thing. And then Tani's like, okay, cool, the letter said we should follow her. And Maestro's like, also we're lying now. But anyway, they decide to go together. So they go on their trek to Kalu Kalu, and on the way there, they spot a road. A big road, and it's completely empty, and on this road there's a gas station. And Maestro is like, I'm not going in there because I'm wanted, possibly for murder. And Tani's like, okay, well I need to go in and get supplies. So off I go. So Maestro waited with Candelabra, and Tani goes in, sells some like rocks for money, and picks up some like chocolate bars. And she comes out and she wakes up Maestro, who is having a nap in the shade, and is like, there you are, like I found you. And Maestro's like, did you see any newspapers in there? Tani's like, no. Remember that, she said. No, there was nothing in there, but I got these chocolate bars. And these chocolate bars, this was cute by the way. While Maestro was sleeping, she'd had a dream about her cat called Violet Crumble. Like she got like a memory that came back of her, and when she wakes up, Tani's brought them both little Violet Crumble chocolate bars. So she's like, oh my god, my cat Violet Crumble. And then they go on their journey. They see the hunters with the sun very much alive, so Tani's like, oh thank god. But they see the hunters, and they've got this little like filly attached to their van, and Maestro and Tani are like, we need to free that horse. Like, that thing's a baby, they're gonna kill it, we need to save that horse. So when the two hunters park their truck and they walk off to go get water, they wait for a hot minute, and then Tani and Maestro come up and they free the horse and they bring it with them. And then after a while of walking with this horse, they're like, I feel like we've been being watched for like a while now. And they're like, yeah, I get that vibe. And then they turn around and the horse's mum is like in the woods waiting for them. And they're both like, okay, we need to let the horse go. Like its mum's right there, we need to go let it go. And Maestro kind of can't bring herself to do it. And then Tani's like, come on, it's the right thing to do, you need to let her go. And then Maestro's like, yeah, you're right, sorry, and lets the horse go back to the mum, and it's like all well and good. And then they carry on, and they get to a hotel by Kalu Kalu. And when they go in, it's all very old, very vintage, like 70s vibe. There's a really staticky TV on with a news report where the reporter is interviewing Tani's mum, who's crying and begging her to come home, even though Tani's like community aren't allowed to be photographed or videoed. So by being on TV, she's like not meant to do that. But she's on the screen like, please come back, like I don't know why you left, you were probably upset, but like I beg you to like please come home. And Tani's like, oh my god, that's really emotional, my poor mum. But then the receptionist lady comes out and is like, oh, you must be Tani, here's another letter from your sister. And then they open it up and they read it, and it's like, go home, Tani. And she's like, I'm not going home, like we've come too far, we've got to keep going. And then they're on the side of the road, and this car pulls up, and it's a couple, and this is where things start getting really good. And it's a couple, and they're offering them a lift, they're saying like, it's really hot, like where did you guys come from? And they were like, oh, we came from the hotel down the road. And they were like, there's not a hotel down the road, like are you guys okay? Oh, backtrack to Debonair. When they leave Debonair's caravan, they turn around and the caravan's gone. Anyway, so they're talking to these people and they're like, there's no hotel there. And then the wife's like, Simon, like we need to at least like, you know, give them water or something. And then Simon's like, yeah, what's her name? Kelly? I don't know, I'm making these names up, but the names were mentioned, and that's important. I know, like maybe we'll just drive ahead and let someone know to expect them kind of thing. And the girls were like, okay, that's fine, but we don't want a lift. So they went off, the car left, and the girls carried on walking, and then they find a car wreck, or like the remnants of a car wreck, with a tiny like headstone type thing with the couple's names on, which the characters didn't think anything about it, but I knew. I'd figured out what was going on, or so I thought. They get to Kalu Kalu, and when they're there, there's a framed drawing, and Tani's just staring at this drawing, and Maestro's like, Tani, like, what's going on? Your sister's not here, like, what's happening? And Tani was like, she came to see it. And Maestro was like, what? And then the picture has Tani's name on it. It was something that she drew for a competition that she won or something. And she told Maestro about how her and her sister had planned to come see it together, but her sister must have gone and see it when she left. And then Tani tells Maestro about how her sister's dead, and she didn't run away, she didn't go missing. She, the night that her and her mother had an argument, her sister went to bed and died. And in her culture, there's this thing called like a spirit walker, where it's like, so there's like two different things, right? There's a spirit walker in which you basically astral project, and your body stays where you are, and your soul goes and like walks around and like interacts with things and people and whatnot. And then there's also the aspect of when you die, your spirit is still wandering, kind of thing. And it gets revealed that all the people that they've interacted with was a spirit that was there to like help them. Apart from the hunters. The hunters were evil spirits, and I can't think what the evil spirits are called, but there's like a distinction. There's good spirits and there's bad spirits, and the hunters were evil spirits that were trying to throw them off track. And the good spirits, like Eddie, Debonair, the couple in the car, the receptionist at the hotel, they were all good spirits that were trying to help them find their sister. And that's why they'd all seen and interacted with Tani's sister, who was also a spirit wandering. And then at that revelation, Maestro realizes, I've missed a key part of the plot. I do apologise. Before they make that realisation, Tani and Maestro have a huge argument because Tani admits that there was newspapers at the gas station and that Maestro's real name is Sienna, and she is the child of like multi-millionaires, and she's a violin playing prodigy. So the violin is hers. She didn't murder anyone. Madame Petrovsky was her violin teacher, and they were in a plane crash in which Madame Petrovsky died protecting Sienna, which is why she's alive now. And then obviously in the crash, Sienna lost her memory or something, and now she's being searched for in the outback. So that's her like backstory. And they had a huge argument because Tani didn't tell her this, but when they make up, despite her name now being confirmed as Sienna, Tani says it doesn't feel right, and she gives her the name Tida, which means like best female friend in Tani's language. So now we've got Tani and Tida, which I think is super cute personally. I was like, oh. But anyways, so they make this realization about the sister, and then Tida's like, my body's still where you found me. I'm not here with you right now, and you need to go home. You need to talk to there's loads of tourists and stuff around, and she's like, I want you to talk, so time's frozen around them, and I want you to talk to one of the officers, and I want you to ask for an escort back home to your mum, because I have stuff that I need to do. I need to go back alone. And this like door, this was a bit weird and a bit out of place, I think, but a big door of light opens up, and Madame Petrovsky is like, come on, and Tida's like, I'm gonna be a better person. And then she walks back, and in about 2 seconds she ends up back at the start of the whole entire book, where there are helicopters who then find her and take her home. And the reason I mentioned earlier about her character feeling quite disjointed is that before she lost her memory, she was like certified spoiled brat. She was like an asshole. And then suddenly she just becomes this lovely, caring person who's ashamed of that person before her. Which I suppose happens when you lose your memory, but the way, again, it's a writing style problem. The way it was written made me like cringe. Although I suppose the premise isn't too bad in itself. But then right at the end you get like a little sneak peek into their future, which is now in the narrator becomes like omniscient, and it's at an art installation of Tani's, where she's done loads of paintings and got loads of published art pieces, and Sienna has come to play at the gallery. And throughout the whole book they spend time together writing a song to be the new map of this uncharted territory, like a song made by one of Tani's ancestors, but for them to pass on to their ancestors. And it's a very like spiritually connecting thing for them that they do throughout the book. And right at the end of the book they play this song that they wrote for everyone at Tani's art installation. And I closed this book, and you know when you close a book and you're like, and it's like one of those things where it's like the girl finishes a book and realizes everything's gonna be okay, and you shut the book and you're like, that's how I felt when I finished the book. So yeah, The Songwalker. That is all I have to yap about for this video. Please let me know what other kind of things you'd like to see or hear from me, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Bye!